Welcome to episode number 6 of Education, a clusterfuck in need of repair. This is the third of 3 episodes dealing with behavior management in schools. Episode 6 is entitled, Just the Tip of the Iceberg. Before we start, I'd like to emphasize that all ideas presented in this podcast are my own and do not reflect the thoughts, opinions, or positions of my employer, Emerson College, its programs, or its representatives. What are 3 aspects of your approach that you think work particularly well for establishing your class environment? How do you respond to a kid who is really struggling or really resisting? Episode 6 is entitled, Just the Tip of the Iceberg. And speaking of the tip of the iceberg, I want to say I'm sorry this episode is dropping a little late because we have a new grandchild. This is our 3rd grandchild. He was born on Thanksgiving Day, so things have been a little crazy around here for the past week. But we're back. So, the tip of the iceberg. Episode 4 was all about stories. Episode 5 was my best strategies for dealing with bad behaviors in class, at the school level, and in the wider community. This episode is an interview with a longtime colleague of mine, Amy Czarnowski Rawlins, who has been very successful in very challenging urban middle and high schools. She talks about her experiences in a variety of environments, those with supportive administration and not, those with supportive parents and not, those with engaged and hopeful teachers and not, but all with kids who needed their teacher's skills to successfully engage with learning, and how she, as a teacher, brings together the emotional environment in the classroom, structures that establish and guide expected behaviors, and the learning outcomes that result. I hope you enjoy it. Welcome to episode 6 of Education, a clusterfuck in need of repair. On this episode, I'm interviewing Amy Czarnowski Rawlins, who is a high school theater teacher. She runs a program in, say it again, Dacula, thank you, Dracula without the R. Dacula, Georgia. And when she started this program, things weren't going great in the program. And now things are going really well in the program. And I've asked her to come and talk because I worked with Amy in 2009, I think was the first year we actually did a project together, in Chelsea, Mass. Chelsea High School is a very challenged urban high school. Their graduation rate in the year that we did it was 54%. And that was 54% of the kids who made it to their senior year. It's a really tough system with very challenged situations for the learners. And her classes were incredibly successful. And the kids were positive, the kids were engaged, and I learned so much from doing that project with her. And so when I was thinking about behavior management, I've seen Amy do behavior management with kids who are not successful in other classes, to say the least. But are incredibly successful in her classes. So I asked her to come and talk to me about it, and that's what we're doing today. Thank you for doing this.
You're so welcome.
I didn't have my glasses on, so everyone can see my wrinkles, and that's bad. Okay. Here we go. Can you give me a bit of background on where you've taught, because now you've taught a number of places, and how your behavior management and classroom climate strategies have evolved through those jobs to where they are now?
Sure. So I'm in my 24th year teaching.
I did not know that.
Yes,
That's
it's wild. And I think where I am now is it's funny to think about where I started. And I grew up very privileged in a white suburban community in Massachusetts and went to college for musical theater. I was a musical theater major and had
Shenandoah, right?
Shenandoah University, yeah. And had aspirations of being a Rockette in New York. And that was just my goal, and I was going to do it. And so I moved home with my parents to save some money to move to New York, and found that I needed to get a job. And back in the day of opening the newspaper and finding an ad, so I was like, oh, Chelsea Public Schools is looking for somebody to direct their musical after school. I was like, oh, that sounds cool. Let's throw my hat in the ring for that. And I got called in, and Chelsea was working with Shakespeare & Company from Lenox, and they were on a grant, and they found that the kids really would benefit from doing a musical, and that's why they were looking for someone, who ultimately ended up being me. And so I was doing that job after school, but the person who hired me was the principal at the middle school, and said, what are you doing during the day? Do you want to, you looking to make some more money? And I was like, sure. She said, we need a permanent substitute at the middle school. And I was like, okay,
As these things happen.
Yes, so it was just very weird happenstance, and I ended up being the permanent sub at the middle school and had some like really crazy stories. Just really, I felt like deer in headlight. I was like, what did I do? What is going on? I ended up as a math teacher, which is in and of itself a what did I do moment, but math teacher for a middle school cluster of students who the students stayed in their classroom because they were so terrible they couldn't even be trusted to transition between classrooms. So the kids stayed and the teachers moved. And I was so fortunate to be the math teacher in that cluster.
You know, I have to be honest, I don't think of you as a math gal.
No, you shouldn't. Nobody should. It was wild. But one of the reasons the kids were in that situation was because the teacher who was the math teacher, and why she ultimately quit on the spot, was because they threw her shoes and her classroom computer out the window onto the sidewalk. So, and they were like, hey, Amy, why don't you go in there? And I was like, what?
Why would I want to do that? Yeah.
And that was just such, I can't even believe that was my foundational year. The behaviors I saw and just what I experienced. I had to go to 2 expulsion hearings just for situations that happened with me and other students.
For middle school?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But when I reflect back on it, and when you had asked me this question, I was like, gosh, I really do think that totally laid the foundation for the teacher that I am, only because through that year, I started very, minutely chipping away at this idea of building relationships with kids. And if that idea that if one person can connect with that kid and starting to find their purpose, why are they coming to school? So then, and that just kind of started to snowball and become part of who I was as a teacher. So my journey in Chelsea became wild. I was a middle school substitute, then I taught music in the middle school, and then I got brought up to the high school to teach chorus and class piano, both skills that I have, unlike math. I was teaching chorus and piano, but we knew that was a means to an end to get me to be teaching drama and dance ultimately. So I was in Chelsea for 11 years.
Can I just ask you something? I'm sorry to interrupt, but for most people, they would listen to the story of your middle school math experience and go, what was it in that caused you to go, yeah, I'll stay here, as opposed to, I'm moving to New York to do my musical theater thing.
I truly, and I ask myself that question all the time, and it's this, I had this aha moment where I somehow, it's almost, I'm not religious by any means. It was more of a spiritual, this is my calling, this is what I'm meant to do. Where it took that 1 or 2 kids to be like, see, I love you. You are so kind. You're so, you're the reason why I come to school. And it was those little moments. And I do come from not my immediate, not my parents, but a family of educators. So I've been around it my life and realizing that while the aspiration of being a Rockette might be glamorous and lovely, but it was really this is what I'm meant to do. And I also am a glutton for punishment, and I do like a challenge. I like to stay in the fire.
Grade.
Yes, exactly. I wanted to fight the fight. I wanted to stay in the war, and so that's that's why I haven't walked away 24 years later. Wow. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so you end up at Chelsea. I interrupted you. You end up at Chelsea High School.
Yeah, and was there for oh gosh, I don't even remember my high. So 8 years at the high school, ultimately, and teaching theater and dance, and it's so interesting because the people that I met when I was working in Chelsea, I'm still very, very close with. It was this sort of, it's that sort of like shared trauma thing where you just develop a really close relationship with people because of what you're going through.
Yeah.
And
the survivors.
Yes. And I still think about, and I've had other teaching experiences since then, but that is just such a crucial part of who I am as a teacher. And I think so much of it was the kids that I was working with and the impact I was able to have on those particular students that I had while I was there. But then I met my husband who lives in Georgia, and I decided to move to Georgia and got a job teaching in Decatur, Georgia, which is very different from Chelsea, Massachusetts. And ended up teaching there for 9 years.
You taught in Decatur for 9 years.
I
did not know that.
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
And sometimes I wonder how and why I lasted that long, and I'm sure that we'll get into that a little bit later about why. Speaking about like staying in the fire, that was one I should have left sooner. But I took a job closer to home now in Decula, and have been there. I'm in the middle of my 4th year there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to take you back to the middle school for a second.
Mm-hmm.
So how did what you learned in Chelsea Middle School inform your behavior management strategy and classroom climate approaches at the high school, then in Decatur, and then in Decula?
I was really fortunate that the end of my time in the middle school in Chelsea was when I began the program at Emerson. So I was viewing a lot of the things that I was doing with the lens of like, I want to be a theater teacher eventually. So I feel like it's such a challenge when I step back to think about it. And I know that it's already been brought up in this podcast, but how we're blessed to be able to teach theater, and which so many of these other behavior management strategies, SEL things, are embedded already, and it's a little bit more natural to infuse your teaching with that. But teaching at the middle school and teaching a content area that wasn't theater forced me to have to kind of like dig a little deeper in my bag of tricks. Doing things like going to their basketball game, just like finding an in with these kids. And again, like I said, I am someone who goes after a challenge, and I find that kid who is being a pain in my butt, you reap what you sow. So it's so much more important to pour into that kid, because you know that down the road, they're not going to be a pain in your butt if they know you care about them. So it was things like going to their basketball games, or chaperoning dances and going out and dancing with them, standing on the dance floor with them and building those relationships, learning about their culture. Like, that was huge in Chelsea. We, had such a large, vibrant Hispanic community there, where we were going to quinceañeras and all these parties, and learning about where they're coming from. Really just, it was a slow process for me, for sure. I definitely made so many mistakes in those first years of teaching, learning that, you don't have to be so rigid. But I have very high expectations of my students.
Yes,
but
you do.
As I mentioned, there's I think great teaching is finding that balance between high expectations and offering grace. And with those kids that, would come in and put their head down on the desk the whole class period, I'm the detective. What are we doing? What's going on? Hey buddy, you tired? do you have breakfast today? And you just asking the questions and getting to know them and finding out why they're there, how they got to those points. I feel like that answer is not very great.
No, it's, you're making me think of 3 of the students who were in the first, it wasn't the playmaking thing, it was the process drama, 14 class period process drama arc we did.
Yes.
3 of those kids were union members because they worked 40 hours a week in, not like Burger King, but like working in offloading meat at the KM factory, serious jobs that they had for 40 hours a week, and they were union members, and then they would come to school all day. It was astounding.
Yes.
And I keep flashing on Armando, so because I was learning their names, like, what's your name? He goes, Pete.
Right.
You jerk.
No, it's not.
I find that hard.
But that is like, okay, he's funny.
Yes, that's
he's
right.
Funny.
He's funny.
He's somebody that I can joke with.
Yep.
And that's like right away. It's the detective work. It's those moments where, okay, he's going to be our straight man in the piece, or whatever weighs in with those kids.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a great answer. So you've talked about this a little bit, but if you had to identify the one thing that's really at the heart of your approach, not just to teaching, though, that's the end goal,
right?
But the heart of your approach to helping the class function behaviorally. I hate the word behavior management because it sounds like you're managing their behavior, which, let's face it, you're not.
Right.
You're encouraging them to manage their own behavior.
Yes.
But what would you say is at the heart of your approach?
I think I will say again, it's that high expectations with grace when needed. And being very clear about those high expectations. But I need to say that coupled with the fact that you can have high expectations, but if they don't care that you care, they're not going to care about those high expectations. So you can put forth, your class agreements or whatever, but I don't do that. People can do that, but if the kids don't know that you care about them following those, or what the end goal is, or see the value in the building of the community in the classroom, there's no point. Like you're spinning your wheels. And so to me, I feel like that those high expectations with a little bit of grace have to come with building those relationships and building the community in the class, which,
Yeah. Okay. Can you give me 3 specific things that you do that you think work particularly well for establishing the environment of your class?
I have to look at that.
That's fine.
In my notes for that one.
You've had 4 hours of sleep, baby.
Right. So I do a lot of when I talk about high expectations, a phrase that I always come back to, and I found that I've used it a lot more lately, just in my present years of teaching, but I like to use the phrase like, this is a place of learning. And I always tie that back to, I'm learning too. This is a place of learning where I'm learning about you, you're learning about me, we're all learning. And sometimes it's almost like, making failing fabulously okay. And it's so funny because I had been thinking about this, and I opened up Instagram today, and there was a meme with Macaulay Culkin, and it had 3 pictures of him, and it said, Macaulay Culkin started in Home Alone when he was 9, fell off the wagon, had severe drug problems and issues in his midlife, and last week he was modeling for Gucci, and it said, falling down is okay. And so I really lean into that a lot with my kids, that I do not expect you to be perfect every single day, because I'm not perfect every single day. And I admit when I make a mistake, when I have said something that I shouldn't have said. And, we do a lot of, let's circle up and let's talk about, gosh, high schoolers can be so filled with drama. So sometimes we're addressing things where there's conflict between people in the class, and hey everybody, remember this is a place of learning. What did we learn from this? What did we do? Did we learn that it's okay to share screenshots of something that somebody said that they probably shouldn't have said? No, because look where it landed us. And we lost an hour's worth of rehearsal time because we were dealing with this challenge. And could that have been avoided? 100%. So I do feel like it's that. So that's one of them, is just owning that this is a place of learning for everybody.
Which is an SEL strategy too. Mm-hmm. It's like we'll go through that process, we'll identify what caused us to lose that hour of rehearsal time, and it's about facilitating their ability to recognize the well they're about to fall into and walk around it.
Right.
And it's combined. Yeah.
And that's just the having them identify that the learning is happening, far beyond the theater standards that we're addressing. And then a big one for me is just meet them where they're at, and really just being a detective. Like I always said, if I was never a theater teacher, I would want to be one of those like investigators in one of the rooms where you're like, so where were you? I love finding information. I love digging. I love being a detective. So getting to that and meeting the kids where they're at, which helps me then evaluate where their expectations are and where are they going to land on the grace versus high expectation scale, and where I can push them. And a lot of kids, like when they speak to me about their experience in my class or my program, a lot of them are like, you pushed me, Ms. Rawlins, you pushed me to a place that I never knew I could go to, and I just really appreciate you believing in me. And so I guess that's, it's probably a little bit more than 3 things, but
that's okay.
I
made up the number.
Okay.
You know that, right?
Yes.
When these questions came down from the mount, it clearly said 3.
I'm sorry. I didn't follow the rules.
Okay, so can you give us some idea of how you respond to a kid who's really struggling? Because there's that range of behavior that kind of falls into more or less into the normal range. And then you have throwing the teacher's shoes and computer out the window.
Yes.
Like, what is wrong with you? Okay?
Right.
So how do you deal with the kid who's really resisting or really struggling in your class, in spite of all the other stuff?
Right. And as Jessie said in her interview with you, every behavior is an unmet need. So it's that, again, detective work. Why are we resistant? And in Chelsea, it was, like you mentioned, a range of things. Kids were tired.
Yeah.
They worked driving a cab at Logan Airport from 4 p.m. to 4 a.m., and then showed up to school the next day. Like, there were so many different factors that contributed to their resistance. So I think that's the first thing, is like find the resistance, but then it's that find that thing. And again, when I step back and try and reflect on just who I am as a teacher, it's just sometimes it's really hard to be like, but that's just what I do. That's how I do it. That's just
right.
me.
And I think that it is who you are as a teacher is intrinsically connected to who you are as a person. Mm-hmm. And some of the things that offend me the most is the idea that we need to remove the person from the teacher, replace it with a set of standards and approaches that are applied to every teacher, every student, in every school, no matter what, because at its heart, in my opinion, because I be old, it's relational. And it has to do with who you are as a person and how you see the world.
Right.
Yeah. But anyway.
And opening up my heart to love on these kids, because that is a need. We all want to be loved, and 90% of the time when I have a kid that's struggling, it's because that's their unmet need.
Yeah.
And other times it's they're afraid. They have fear, and they're afraid of not looking cool, or who knows?
Yeah.
It does. We
So
don't
there's
even
a
need
list.
to know, right? Like you can identify the need and then figure out how to pull them in. So it's that, what's that in with them? And I actually just have a situation with a kiddo I have this year, who I had last year in my acting 1 class, and he passed by the skin of his teeth, and he is now in acting 2. He's a senior, and he didn't do a whole lot of great stuff last year. Attendance was a big issue. He has a lot of stuff going on at home. And this year, he keeps saying to me, he's like, I'm going to be in the movies. Mr. Rawlins, I'm going to be in the movies. I said, well, Chris, I need you to come to my class first. I need you to come to school, and then we can work on the skills to get you in the movies. And he goes, okay, I got you. And it was just this kind of like, hey, where were you yesterday? Just those little, like, you don't have to get into it, you don't have to tell me, like, just knowing that somebody noticed you weren't there.
Yes.
And when I tell you, I have him first period this year. Ooh. When I tell you, he runs down the hallway to get into my room. He's like, Mr. Rawlins, I'm here. And we started doing a midsummer. We're doing a little bit of Shakespeare, and I cast him as Oberon. And that kid is off book. He is like, Mr. Rawlins, I really, really, really want to do an accent. I really, really want to do an RP accent for Oberon. I said, okay. And he comes to me during his lunch period, and we watch. I have this teaching artist that I've actually had Zoom and stuff, and I have some of his videos, and like we sit and we watch and learn about how he can do this accent and apply it to his.
Wow.
And his other teachers are like, what did you do? How he's coming to school. And it's so, to me, it's just like, it's that carrot. He got it. He grabbed the carrot, and he's here.
Well, and you cared about him, and you were upfront about that.
Right.
It wasn't like, you have to tease out the fact that I care about you.
No,
I'm going to tell you.
I'm
going to tell you. I want you to come.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Right.
Come to school, and I will teach you this.
Yes. Yeah. And that's just like one little, example that happens a lot.
Yeah.
Noticing when kids aren't there, noticing when they're wearing the same hoodie 7 days, and that's to them, wow, somebody cares about me.
That's right.
Yeah.
There are many examples from our time working together, but I'm going to move on.
Yes.
Okay, but this example I will use. When we worked together 15 years ago.
Yes.
Okay, I'm better now. There was a popular kid picking on an unpopular kid. The unpopular kid was autistic.
Yeah, he's on the spectrum.
And he would not get off of that kid's back. And so you got the basketball coach involved. Mm-hmm. And it worked unbelievably well. And by the end of the semester, not only was he no longer picking on him, he was like buds with him. It was shocking. Yes. Can you talk a little bit about how you figured out to do that, and do you still network that way?
Yes. It's that some kids I feel like need to know that more than one person is watching them, and that maybe, the popular kid didn't believe that I was, he didn't have me 100% on his side. So the detective work, who can I bring in? What can I do? Who else is in his little head as an influence? And that's when I brought Titus in, and just, was it. I also feel like the basketball coach is a good teacher in terms of knowing the kids, relational with the kids, and having that real talk. Like, dude, you can't talk to people like that. You can't, that he's a person. He is a human who has feelings, and you're hurting his feelings. And being able to get through to him, I guess. And the school that I'm at now, we have a very strong culture of that, is the team of I mean, the number of emails that I exchange and receive, and of a team of teachers like, hey, you teach this kid, can you help me with blah blah blah? And it's that kind of, I also thought about that song from the Muppets, that if just one person believes in you, that is, and Snoopy the musical too, but
Yeah.
and then the song, like, well, why not more? Why not 2? Why not 3? And it's that some kids might just need to know that there's more than one person who cares about them. And
Part of the thing that sticks with me about the popular kid picking on the other kid is that it's something I call, with my own kids, pressure point. I don't have a standing behavioral practice. Each one of them cared about something different, and I would use that thing to leverage their desire to behave more appropriately.
Yes.
And with this kid, it was that Titus said, you can't play. If I get this notebook back and it says you've been behaving poorly towards the other kid, you can't play in the game that week. And man, the transition to more appropriate behavior was instantaneous. And then I think people go, well, but he probably resented him after that. And no, it actually opened the door to the possibility that they could have a different relationship.
right, because he was able to see, wow, he's right. Like, this is, I'm not gaining anything by picking on him. This,
Yes.
yeah, he was, the popular kid was a smart kid. He wasn't stupid.
Yeah.
He knew what he was doing.
Oh, yes, and it was very intentional, which made it even worse, because you feel like you have other things in your toolbox to pull on. Like, why are you pulling on this?
And when I tell you, every year I have a situation that is similar to that. You know, there's a kid in the class who is maybe just a little odd, you know, that some people might view as odd. I love them. I think they're so fun and interesting and quirky, and they are the best theater performer, best kids in theater. And, you know, again, leaning into that thing that the kid who is picking on them cares about, and using that to leverage their behavior.
And it isn't a manipulation. It's like behavior is motivated. Behavior that is not rewarded is not repeated.
Right.
And so whether it's rewarded by you get to play in your basketball game because you controlled your impulse to hurt his feelings, or whether it's because, you know, you get the intrinsic reward of realizing, oh, I'm being a better person.
Yes.
Because they do feel that. They're not just little animals. And what's going on right now, and one of the reasons that behavior management stuff is a 3-episode sequence, is it's huge. It's a huge thing, but we're talking about it like it's a prison thing. All you have to do is take away their visitation rights. You know, like, no. They're developing humans. That's not it. So, can you talk about the role of student agency in your classes? Because I would say that the first time I really thought about student agency was watching you teach when we were working together. Can you talk about any way you see that impacting their behavior?
So, in thinking about this question, I thought about how both in Chelsea and here in Tequila, not as much in Decatur, but I was building a theater program from nothing. I had nothing to work with. And so when you have nothing, you just have to kind of go with the flow. And I'm thinking specifically now where I am, like, I didn't have a kid to run the light board, but I needed a kid to try. I needed to give a kid an opportunity to try to run the light board. And so there's this kind of finding this level of trust with them. And as I keep saying, it's a place of learning. You can't learn if you're never given an opportunity. So I make failure a celebratory event in my classroom, that it's okay. It's okay to fall on your face. It's totally fine. You look foolish doing that dance step going across the floor, that's great. We will go back and try it again, and nobody's gonna, single you out or anything. So it's that, you want to try to run the light board? Great. Here, we're going to learn together. You're going to learn how to do this, and somebody else is going to learn how to set up a prop table, or because I need that for my program. And so when you're building something as a new teacher or building a new program, you have to start somewhere. And I feel like those kids, people who feel appreciated will always do more than expected. And when I say, "Gosh, you did some really great work there with those light cues. That was really beautiful," and that kid gets a little twinkle in their eye, and they're like, "Wow, I'm going to come back tomorrow and do more for Mr. Rawlins, and I'm going to make sure that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do when I'm in her class and more." And sort of that whole the playmaking experience that we did too in Chelsea, giving kids a lot of the ownership of the work that we're doing, which is just inherent in the playmaking process, but working with those kids to use what they know. And I mean, that's agency in and of itself, but having them be the owners of it.
Yeah. Well, I also think about the kid who he did not want to participate. He was just like, "I'm not doing it." And at one point I just said, "Can you run a camera? We need to document the rehearsal process. Can you run a camera?" And he was like, "Maybe." He didn't know how, but who cares? Because I didn't actually need to document the rehearsal process. I just needed him on his feet. And so he did it. And then he ended up filming all the monologues that we projected instead of having kids doing them live. And he took control of that. 2 years later, I ran into him in the hall. He was still in high school, still struggling. But he remembered, and he was like, "Oh, miss,"
Right.
And part of it is, people always say, "Well, we can do this in theater classes, but you can't really do that in a math class or a science class." Yes, you can.
Yeah.
Yes, you can. It's like, think about your own curriculum and how that's going to apply. How you let the kid try something. How you let the kid tell you where they feel strong or where they feel like they could take a step forward, instead of, lockstep, next step to the test. It really is it makes an astounding difference in their ability to function.
And I learned, when I build programs, I learned that from you. The whole, and I think about that all the time. Like, what can I have this kid do? They can do anything. They could, close the curtain, but it's purpose. They have a purpose. They have a job, and they then take ownership of that, whatever it is that we're doing, and that is huge for some kids.
I learned that from little tiny kids in elementary school. That was the first time I realized, okay, you can't, you're paralyzed. You know what? You could do the lights. You want to try the lights? Yeah. So, in which case was just like flick. It was not a complex system. But yes, and that's how I learned about that. I was like, oh, okay. Now you're not a pain in my butt. Jumping around like a little flea on a hot griddle. Now you're waiting for that moment when you have a job to do. And I'm going to ask you one other thing, because we're going to transition into discussing administration. No, I learned a lot talking to you about it when we Zoomed the other day. About how your experience and the teachers' experiences with the administration in the building affects the way they engage with the kids. Can you talk about that a little?
The way the administrators engage with the kids?
No, the way the teachers engage with the kids.
I think at the school that I'm at now, it is a direct reflection that my relationship with my administrators mirrors my relationship with my students. There's trust, there's appreciation, there's gratitude, there is joy in the shared time together. And I think when the students see that relationship between our administrators and the teachers, again, that when people feel appreciated, they will always do more than expected. I feel like that is very, very, very apparent in my school, that I then approach my relationship with my students. I want to appreciate them. I think, the fact that you choreographed that number because I couldn't get it together and I couldn't figure it out, I'm so appreciative of you, because you saved me an extra day's worth of work. And that, granted, the choreography has some flaws, but that's how we learn. We figure out that, that gigantic V formation isn't going to work, so we're going to fix it together. And my administration presently has that exact same approach. You want to try something? Cool, try it. Let's do it. Oh, didn't work. Let's figure it out together. Maybe we can step back and look at it in a different way. And it is very there are so many parallels between the way our administrators treat the teachers in our building and the way the teachers treat the students in our building.
Okay, we're going to end there.
Okay. Yes.
You were great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is the end of our behavior management sequence, at least for the time being. If you have a behavior management strategy that you find very useful, please DM me in my Instagram account, educationclusterf_CK, or email it to me at educationclusterfck@gmail.com, and I'll share them at the next episode. As always, thank you for listening. If you have time, please post a review or share this with someone you think it would be useful for. I'll talk at you in about 2 weeks on December 20th, at which time I'll invite you to share what you know when we come back from a holiday break in mid-January.
J like the letter, I'm making several waves. I know the mission is same. I made a splash, now all of my passes last like running a race with Usain. I keep it coming like this a buffet. And if I'm stumbling, I'm in the grave. Never gon' fumble it, I get the bag and I run with it, gunning it, gunning it, gunning it, gunning it.